The Israel Defense Force conducted an airstrike targeting at least 2 Iranian-backed militia bases in western Syria on April 1, 2023. Unidentified Western intelligence sources reported that rockets hit the Al-Daba military airport and T4 Taiz air base, according to a Reuters report. An unidentified Syrian military source claimed to the Syrian Arab news agency that Israeli forces targeted multiple military targets in Homs city and its outskirts on April 1, killing 5 Syrian soldiers. The Syrian Ministry of Defense released a statement claiming that Syrian air defense systems shot down several Israeli missiles over Homs city and countryside. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights and Crisis 24 reported that the IDF also damaged an Iranian research facility in Khirbet al-Tain, western Homs. An anti-Syrian regime Twitter account claimed that a Lebanese Hezbollah leader was killed in the Israeli airstrike on April 1. Iranian and Iranian-backed media outlets reported on deaths of martyrs in Israeli attacks, likely to set conditions for an attack on U.S. or coalition forces. The IRGC Public Relations Department announced IRGC military advisor Captain Mogdad Megani Jafar Abadi died from injuries sustained in the Israeli airstrike in Damascus on March 30th. Iranian state media previously reported that an IRGC military advisor Milad Haidari was killed in the same airstrike in a statement on March 30th. Raisi administration spokesperson Bahadouri Jeromi warned that Iran would retaliate for the Israeli airstrikes that reportedly killed Abadi and Haidari in a statement on April 2, reported by Iranian state media outlet Tasnim. Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Nasser Kanani also released a statement warning that Iran reserves the right to respond to Israeli strikes at the right place and time during a press conference on April 2. An unspecified Iranian-backed militia flew an unmanned aerial vehicle, UAV, into Israeli airspace, which highlights the risk of further escalation in Syria. The militia flew the UAV from Syria into Israeli airspace north of Lake Tiberias, Golan Heights. The IDF reported that its forces monitored the drone in flight before downing it. Israeli media outlets reported that the drone was Iranian-made. Iranian media outlet Intikab circulated reporting on the drone entering Israeli airspace in a report on April 2. Israeli air defense systems shot and destroyed a Qassem Shahab UAV as ad-Din al-Qassem brigade of Hamas launched towards Israeli airspace on April 3. CTP cannot verify if Iran directed the militias to fly the drones into Israel. Iranian-backed militants periodically conduct attacks independent of Iranian direction. The Iranian regime has cohered around a collective approach to enforcing mandatory veiling laws that frames the laws as the will of the people, possibly to avoid igniting another round of anti-regime protests. The regime publicly signaled its agreement to strictly enforce the mandatory hijab law on March 30th, as CTP previously assessed. The regime's enforcement model seeks to co-opt the social collective as a complementary enforcement mechanism to its security services. The regime has encouraged pro-regime loyalists to issue verbal warnings to unveiled women and called on the relevant state entities to continue their enforcement, albeit more cautiously. The Education Ministry published a statement on April 3 outlining a guidance plan for educating the youth in the importance of veiling and chastity. The statement also suggested that schoolchildren who do not comply with veiling standards will be excused without any detailed explanation. The regime has also sought to expand its enforcement network beyond ordinary regime supporters to non-state social institutions such as local stores and educational centers. The regime reportedly sealed several local shops for serving unveiled women as part of an effort to expand the costs of non-compliance to those who have not directly violated veiling standards, thereby increasing the incentive for shop owners to exert pressure on their customers to observe such standards. Iranian officials have described adherence to the law as a popular demand in recent days. President Ebrahim Raisi stated on April 3 that most women and girls adhere to the law and that observance of the hijab is a common demand. Islamic Guidance and Culture Minister Mohammad Mehdi Ismaili similarly stated that the Iranian nation, as opposed to the regime, opposes improper veiling. The regime likely instituted a temporary pause on the strict enforcement of the law and its guidance patrol following the death of Mahsa Amini. The regime has altered its approach to what has been a long-standing commitment to mandatory veiling enforcement only following the aftermath of the Mahsa Amini protest movement. President Ebrahim Raisi signed a decree on August 15, 2022, authorizing the use of facial recognition and other surveillance technology to identify those who were not complying with the veiling law immediately prior to the Mahsa Amini protest movement in September. The regime likely instituted a temporary pause on the strict enforcement of the law and its guidance patrol following the death of Mahsa Amini. The regime's collective punishment approach to mandatory veiling, particularly its encouragement of pro-regime loyalists to enforce mandatory veiling, may exacerbate tensions between the Iranian public and the regime. Regime-affiliated media recirculated a 1995 video of Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei condemning attacks against women with bad hijab in recent days, likely in response to a man pouring yogurt on two unveiled women in Khorasan Razavi province on March 31st. Republishing the video indicates the regime is attempting to signal that it supports citizens' involvement in hijab enforcement but disapproves of physical altercations between regime loyalists and unveiled women. The regime has no ability to control the actions of private citizens who decide to enforce the hijab law, however. Citizens who choose to enforce this law are likely the most passionate about it, and thus may use confrontational methods, such as physical harassment, to implement it. Iranian citizens may additionally accuse individuals who enforce the hijab law of being regime officials, even if they are in fact private citizens. This dynamic puts the regime in a dangerous situation because if vigilantes confront unveiled women aggressively or violently, citizens may place blame for these individuals' actions on the regime and subsequently call for new anti-regime demonstrations. Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei has been conspicuously absent from ongoing inter-regime discussions about the hijab, possibly to shield himself from criticisms of the regime's uncompromising stance on this issue. Khamenei has not explicitly mentioned the hijab in recent weeks, although he did indirectly reference Iran's cultural issues in his no-rouse message on April 21st. Numerous Friday prayer leaders, who receive guidance for the content of their sermons from the Office of the Supreme Leader, emphasized the issue of mandatory veiling in their sermons on March 31st, however. Khamenei's relative silence on the hijab issue may indicate that he recognizes that the regime's reinvigorated effort to enforce the hijab law is unpopular among segments of the Iranian population. He may therefore be attempting to disassociate himself from this issue to maintain public support. Khamenei's silence is particularly noteworthy given that he publicly reiterated the mandatory hijab requirement in January 2022 as the Mahsa Amini protest movement was culminating, as CTP previously reported. Khamenei may perceive that there is more resistance to the hijab law among Iranian women now than there was in January, although there is no evidence to support this hypothesis. Regime officials close to Khamenei have additionally attempted to portray the Supreme Leader as a fatherly and loving figure in recent days, possibly to downplay Khamenei's role in directing the regime's crackdown on hijab violations. Supreme Leader Office head Mohammad Mohammadi Ghalpayegani stated on April 3 that Khamenei is extremely kind and cannot tolerate seeing children cry. Ghalpayegani added that Khamenei responds to the hardships and unkindness of people with patience and forgiveness.